David Parker's day always began before sunrise. At 5 every morning, the alarm on his old phone buzzed, and within minutes, he was preparing breakfast for his 10-year-old son, Ethan. Their small apartment wasn't fancy, but it was clean, warm, and filled with quiet love. While pancakes or eggs cooked on the stove, David packed Ethan's school lunch, carefully slipping in a handwritten note that always ended with the same words: "Be kind, be brave. I love you." After dropping Ethan at school, David headed to the underground parking garage where he worked as an attendant. His gray uniform blended in with everyone else's, and most people barely noticed him. To the office workers and wealthy clients who parked there every day, he was simply the polite man who greeted them with a smile, helped them find a parking space, and wished them a pleasant day. No one imagined that behind those calm eyes was a man who had once lived a very different life. Years earlier, David had served in an elite military rescue unit. He had completed dangerous missions in places few people had even heard of. He was trained to stay calm under pressure, protect innocent lives, and make life-or-death decisions in seconds. But after losing his wife, Emma, to a serious illness, everything changed. His greatest mission was no longer serving his country. It was raising his young son with love, stability, and hope. David never spoke about his past. The medals and photographs from his military years remained locked away in an old box beneath his bed. He believed that chapter of his life had ended forever. His entire world now revolved around Ethan. Every extra hour he worked and every dollar he saved was for his son's future. Although money was often tight, David never complained. He believed that character mattered more than wealth, and that honest work was something to be proud of. What David didn't know was that before the day ended, the quiet life he had worked so hard to build would be tested in a way he had never expected. The evening shift was usually the quietest part of David's day. Most office employees had already gone home, leaving the underground parking garage unusually silent. The sound of distant engines echoed through the concrete structure as David walked between the rows of parked vehicles, checking that everything was in order. Years of experience had taught him to notice small details that others ignored. A broken light, an unfamiliar vehicle, or unusual behavior never escaped his attention. As he returned to the security booth, a sleek black luxury sedan slowly entered the garage. David recognized the company logo on the license plate. The vehicle belonged to Carter Innovations, one of the city's largest technology firms. He politely guided the driver toward a reserved parking space. Just as the car came to a stop, David noticed something strange. A dark van rolled into the garage without taking a parking ticket. Instead of heading toward an empty space, it stopped several meters behind the luxury sedan. 4 men stepped out, dressed in dark clothing with their faces partially covered by masks. Their movements were calm and organized, not like ordinary criminals acting on impulse. David's heartbeat quickened. The years he had spent in military rescue operations had taught him to recognize danger before it unfolded. Their formation, the way they scanned the surroundings, and the silent hand signals they exchanged all pointed to careful planning. He reached for the emergency phone inside the booth and quietly alerted the police, giving them the garage location and explaining that a possible kidnapping was in progress. The dispatcher promised that officers were on the way, but David knew they might not arrive in time. One of the masked men yanked open the rear door of the luxury sedan, while another grabbed the young woman inside. She struggled desperately, shouting for help as they tried to force her toward the waiting van. David glanced around. Several innocent people were still walking toward the elevators, completely unaware of what was happening. He couldn't risk a reckless confrontation that might put them in danger. Taking a deep breath, he picked up a long metal cleaning pole leaning against the wall and stepped forward. "Leave her alone," he called out firmly. The kidnappers turned toward him, surprised that a simple parking attendant had dared to interfere. They underestimated him immediately. That was the mistake David had been hoping they would make. The man closest to him charged first, expecting to overpower what looked like an ordinary parking attendant. David stepped aside at the last second, using the attacker's momentum against him. The kidnapper stumbled into the side of the van, dropping the zip ties he had been carrying. The sudden move caught the others off guard. "Run!" David shouted to the frightened woman. For a moment she hesitated, shocked by what was happening. Then she broke free from the man's grip and hurried toward the security booth. David knew she wouldn't get far if the kidnappers regrouped, so he moved to block their path. The second attacker swung a heavy flashlight toward David's shoulder. David raised the metal pole just enough to deflect the blow, then pushed the man backward without striking him unnecessarily. Years of military rescue training had taught him that ending a fight quickly with the least possible force was always better than seeking revenge. The garage echoed with footsteps, shouted orders, and screeching tires as one kidnapper attempted to reverse the van toward the exit. At the same time, another tried to chase the escaping woman. David grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher and sprayed a thick cloud across the driver's windshield. The white powder completely blocked the driver's vision, forcing him to stop before causing an accident. The young woman reached the security booth and locked herself inside. With trembling hands, she thanked David through the glass while calling the emergency operator to confirm their location. Moments later, the distant sound of police sirens grew louder. Realizing their plan had failed, the kidnappers abandoned the van and attempted to flee on foot. Officers rushed into the garage from multiple entrances, quickly surrounding and arresting the suspects. As the chaos settled, the rescued woman approached David with tears in her eyes. "I'm Sophia Carter," she said quietly. "You risked your life for someone you didn't even know. I will never forget what you did for me." Police officers secured the area while paramedics checked everyone involved. Apart from a few bruises on his shoulder and arm, David was unharmed. One of the officers walked over and looked at him with surprise after hearing how he had handled the situation. "Where did you learn to stay that calm?" the officer asked. David gave a modest smile. "I had some training a long time ago." He didn't mention the military or the dangerous rescue missions he had completed years earlier. Those memories belonged to another chapter of his life. He was simply grateful that no innocent person had been seriously hurt. Sophia Carter stood nearby, still trying to process everything that had happened. As CEO of one of the city's fastest-growing technology companies, she was used to solving business problems, negotiating million-dollar contracts, and leading hundreds of employees. But nothing had prepared her for the fear she felt when strangers tried to force her into a van. She walked toward David, who was quietly picking up the scattered parking cones knocked over during the struggle. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. David shrugged with a gentle smile. "It's part of my job. The garage still needs to be ready for tomorrow morning." His answer caught her off guard. Most people would have been talking to reporters or accepting praise from everyone around them. Instead, David was cleaning up as though nothing extraordinary had happened. The following afternoon, Sophia visited the parking garage again, this time without bodyguards or a luxury convoy. She carried a small paper bag from a nearby cafe. "I thought you might have missed lunch yesterday," she said as she handed it to David. He thanked her politely, but seemed uncomfortable with the attention. During their conversation, Sophia learned that David was raising his 10-year-old son alone after losing his wife several years earlier. He never complained about his struggles or asked for sympathy. Every decision he made was centered on giving Ethan a stable and honest life. As Sophia drove away that evening, she couldn't stop thinking about the quiet man in the gray uniform. He had risked everything to save a complete stranger and expected nothing in return. She realized that people with integrity like David were incredibly rare, and she was determined that this would not be the last time their paths crossed.